Welcome to the Healthy and Wealthy Retirement. My name is Mark Struthers, and I am your host. And today we're talking about failure to launch. This is loosely based off a Bloomberg article, maybe Bloomberg Wealth. I work with them once in a while. Wasn't involved in this article, but it was excellent, and it hit home because I have two teenage boys, and I work a lot with parents, and I work a lot with those that are entering retirement. So this article, the numbers are scary. U.S. parents spend about $500 billion every year on their 18 to 34-year-old children, which is double what they put towards their retirement. That's a big number. And the number itself is big, and obviously there's some concerns just about having that generation that's not quite developing, maybe like they should. And who says how they should develop? But it's a fact that retirement savings are suffering. That if you have, the tough part is that when your kids are in their 20s, especially late 20s to early 30s, you are probably nearing retirement. And if you're going through your 20s and spending more on your adult kids than you are in retirement, as someone who wants everyone to have a healthy and wealthy retirement, that's where I get concerns. More kids are living with their parents since the 1940s. And, as you probably guessed, the 1940s has had its own issues. How did we get here? Well, you could point a lot of fingers, but student loan debt and affordable housing and the pandemic are three big ones. Those of you who had kids pretty much of any age, you could tell that the pandemic impacted almost all of them. There are some cultures where helping your kids now is an investment in your future so they can support you later on. I think this is something a little bit different, but some folks do that. Some folks say, you know what, I'm foregoing my retirement savings is my kids. I have 2 or 3 or 4 kids. I'm counting on this. It's kind of like a venture capitalist. I'm going to throw some money and support him, and all of them knowing one of them is going to make it well enough, make it big to support me. And each culture has its own ways. I mean, as a very open-minded financial planner, for me, it's about helping them reach their goals and helping them make an informed decision. But this really, I don't think is that. So is the only reason kids coming home financial? Probably not. I think the pandemic had a lot to do with that, just as far as the emotional and mental development. A year for a 14-year-old is a lot bigger than a year for a 50-year-old. So I think if you're delayed a year like the pandemic, I think that can hurt. In the book Failure to Launch, Why Your 20-something Hasn't Grown Up and What to Do About It, this book was mentioned in the Bloomberg Wealth article. The author identifies 3 skills that kids need to have to succeed. One of them is finding a sense of purpose. Makes sense. Number 2, developing administrative responsibilities. That is actually, oddly enough, is simple, fairly simple, but almost never done. And 2, number 3, which I like this one the best, it's cultivating interdependence. The first one, is pretty obvious. If we have a sense of purpose, that helps us with motivation or developing habits. It gives us a reason to wake up in the morning. That's true with retirees. It's not just kids. That's true with adults. For an adult, maybe less so. Once you get your career going, your kids, those are purpose enough. But I think for kids trying to find their footing, a sense of purpose, or those in retirement, which maybe there's some parallels there, having a sense of purpose is critical. The last 2 might come as a surprise, but the administrative one, really shouldn't. Teaching them how to do a budget. I know more of this is taught in schools, but their credit score. Teaching them to proactively address these things, get on top of them, live within their means, start to earn some money, start to save some money, how to pay bills. That how is a big one as well. You're simply telling them, but if you actually have to show them, and I sometimes when folks will go keep saying how to where they might be trying to avoid just doing it, but helping them down that path at least a little way, say, this is how you do it. How do you get a good credit score? You can say you pay your bills on time. Show me how to do it. So showing the kids set up auto pay, but making sure there's enough money in there each month, or having them physically write a check, which I know boomers did that a lot. Still do. Gen Xers, I'm surprised how many actually write checks, but many still do. But doing those things, giving them the base to show them what you need to do, why you're doing it, and how. So the administrative stuff, and including the credit score, have them open, getting them lines of credit early, establishing a file early. And many adults really don't know how the credit scores work. Learn, get some help if you're a client. we're very, very happy to help get them going down that path, and then you start throwing in things like Roth IRAs or I bonds or whatever the case may be. Starting them down that path gives them the base to do it. It's odd that we will often spend so much time and money helping our kids get an A in chemistry, and they could be an A student in AP chemistry, or helping them make the varsity team in two sports with hundreds of hours of camps and thousands of dollars. Yet we don't teach them how to pay bills, how to have a budget, which on a relative basis is pretty easy. Even getting a feel for the credit score might take you some time to learn about credit utilization, types of credit, and so on. But you really do it start fairly early, getting the kids used to setting that up. And the interdependence, I thought, was a good one. All too often, parents don't have these talks with their kids. A lot of times spouses don't have these talks with each other. But knowing that you're all in this boat together, I'll use a Minnesota Golden Gopher since they're winning. They're all rowing the boat together. If one person in that boat is not rowing or rowing against you, might not make it to shore, retirement shore. I threw that little analogy together quickly. Forgive me if it's not perfect. But many times children don't realize that. Kids need to know. You need to start conversations early that what they do affects you. And for me too, I see this with a lot of parents. They need even this. Sometimes it's not just the cost of travel, basketball, hockey, sports, dance, whatever it is. It's not just the cost of the parents and the time of the parents, which if the parents are taking time away from work, it's going to affect their future, and not to mention the money they're spending, but also if you don't get that scholarship. Now, again, part of being a good advisor is making sure you're well balanced. There's always a cost and risk. You don't want to be perfect financially and academically, but be miserable and have lost out on memories. You need a return on memories as well as return on your investment. But when a child is playing 3 sports and doing travel teams and doing all these things, it's understandable where their ACT might not be a 32. Their weighted GPA might not be a 4.25. So making informed decisions that everyone knows that we're in this boat together. We have a finite amount of time and resources. How are we going to allocate this as best we can? And it doesn't have to be perfect, but the idea is that you make an effort here, so that I think that interdependence will help get children, even if it doesn't click right away. I see this with my own boys. It might even be months or years down the road. All of a sudden, when they have a choice to make, then it might hit them. Do I want to take this AP class? And one of my boys, do I want to take a summer class? I know how much this school costs. I know what this means. And as a parent, I think you kind of have to guide kids both ways to say, you might be taking on too much. Are you sure you sure you have the social life that you need? But the important thing is that you're putting some thought together, and it's not just the kid. The kid doesn't realize. If you don't teach the kid accounting or credit bureaus, or you don't expose them to the fact that their actions have consequences, not just for them, but for you as parents, you just can't expect them to all of a sudden a switch to go on and all of a sudden they know. So the biggest thing is one word: plan. Planning not just the numbers and scenarios, it means having these conversations with your child and spouse. And I say this as someone who's been married for 20 years. Spouses are not going to always be on the same page, but they should at least try to be reading from the same book. That means trying to have those conversations with each other. You don't want to get to when the kid's 22 and wants to move home for several years, and one spouse says, "Yep, move right in," and the other spouse says, "No." Things aren't going to be perfect, but you have a better chance for success if you start these conversations early. For boomers and Gen Xers, moving back home was a sign of failure. That's changed for good and bad. The idea that a kid coming home, if it's well planned out, and sometimes things just happen, life happens, but it's how we prepare before life happens and how we address life after that's important. But also, when there's no plan, there's usually fewer options. It's like with college or retirement. If you're forced to do something that it comes out of nowhere, your options are usually fewer, and it usually costs more. So here, I know I've kind of alluded to this, but here are my list of things parents should do to help kids to launch. Create a budget for them while they're at home. And this means that once they move home, and no expensive cars. I think this was the article where they talked about a child who was living at home, but driving like a $50,000, $60,000 car. Again, this is why you need to attempt to get on top of these things early. Communicate with the children. When they move home, communicate. Preteens, establish boundaries. Let them know what to expect. As teens too, let them know what college costs. If you tell a child, and they're not going to fully understand, especially when you're a teenager trying to picture something in the future. But if you give them an idea of what college costs, what life's going to be after college, and you at least get them thinking, it does start to have an effect as far as their choices, what schools they look at, what majors they choose. Our podcast and YouTube channel is just getting started, so I don't think we'll get a lot of hate mail, but honestly, this might scare some kids moving away from liberal arts degrees. There's nothing wrong with a liberal arts degree. And maybe with AI, more and more companies are going to want folks who have that background. Maybe it leads to a higher emotional EQ, emotional intelligence. But if you have these conversations, it's going to set them up to make better decisions and have a better chance of success. And also show them how it's impacting you. If they are trying to get into a certain school and they want you to pay for it, tell them we might have to work an extra 2 or 3 years. Teaching the kids to fish, the admin stuff, the checkbook, the credit book, and for a sense of purpose, think about guide, encouraging, helping them find a path forward, and explore all options. Don't be too closed-minded based on what other people think. So trade schools come to mind for this. Make sure you are thinking outside the box. Get out of your comfort zone as far as thinking the way things should be. You need to think about where things are. The child's having trouble. Maybe they dropped out of school. Okay, what do we do to move forward so they can get to independence? And how does that impact me? And that means everyone's involved. Lastly, don't be so hard on yourself. All parents make mistakes. You can do everything right and things still don't work out. Focus is on the positives, the resources you have. Try to put the past, learn from the past, but put the past behind you and say, what do we have? Where do we want to go? And how do we get there? So I think if you try to make the most of your journey, your child's going to be happier, and you're probably going to have a healthier, a wealthier, and a happier retirement. Don't forget to hit subscribe. Right there. Hit it. Hit it.
Haven't we made it, my love? Oh, honey, look how we made it this far.